Welcome to Read a Book in 30 Minutes. Today we're diving into Guns, Germs and Steel. This book was first published in 1997 and won the Pulitzer Prize for Nonfiction the following year. It's been a global bestseller ever since. The author, Jared Diamond, is a geography professor at the University of California, Berkeley. In 2005, Foreign Policy magazine ranked him as one of the world's 100 most influential public intellectuals, coming in at number 9. His recognition is closely tied to the popularity of Guns, Germs and Steel. The book's subtitle is The Fates of Human Societies. In it, Diamond repeatedly asks, why do societies around the world differ so much? Some can build rockets to explore the universe, while others still use primitive stone tools in the jungle. And over the past 5 centuries, why has it been the powers from Eurasia that conquered civilizations on other continents? What is the ultimate cause behind all of this? To answer these questions, Diamond tells a classic story, the Battle of Cajamarca. In 1492, Columbus discovered the New World, and less than 50 years later, European explorers began conquering the Americas. In November 1532, in what is now northern Peru, Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro, with just 106 infantry and 62 cavalry, defeated 7,000 Incan soldiers. With such a small force, the Spanish were able to dismantle the mighty Inca Empire within a few years. On the surface, it seemed that the Spanish were victorious because of superior weapons, steel swords, armor, guns, and horses. These Spanish soldiers, armed with these technologies, had a clear advantage over the indigenous warriors who fought with stone, bronze, or wooden clubs, plus slingshots and primitive weapons. But there was another, far more destructive weapon that the Europeans had: diseases. Smallpox, measles, and influenza spread faster than the European conquerors themselves, killing off up to 95% of the Native American population over several centuries. These diseases helped make the Americas ultimately a European-dominated world. But Diamond doesn't stop at guns, germs, and steel. These, he argues, are only the surface reasons for European dominance. The real underlying cause of civilization differences, he believes, is agriculture. It was the unique geography and ecology of Eurasia that allowed its inhabitants to develop advanced agricultural systems first. Guns, germs, steel. These came from the rise of agricultural civilizations. Now let's talk about how agriculture first emerged in Eurasia. Agriculture is the process by which humans domesticate wild plants and animals for their use. Familiar crops like wheat and beans, as well as domesticated animals like cows, horses, and dogs, are the result of this domestication. During this process, humans selected species with beneficial mutations and bred them to maintain these traits. This means that the environment where you live must have suitable species, and the conditions must be complex enough to allow for rich variations in plants and animals. And this is where Eurasia's unique environment comes into play. This environment had 3 major impacts. First, it made the right species available for domestication. A prime example is the Fertile Crescent, a crescent-shaped region covering modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Palestine. This area is located in the Mediterranean climate zone, which has mild, wet winters and hot, dry summers. Many cereal grains and legumes adapted well to this environment, growing as small annual plants that invested their energy in producing seeds, not stalks. These plant seeds mature before the long dry season hits, allowing them to enter a long dormancy period and wait for the next rainy season to come. This type of plant, with a short growing cycle, high yield, easy harvesting, and excellent storage capacity, was practically born to be a crop. Moreover, the Fertile Crescent's diverse geography, from the lowest point at the Dead Sea to over 5,000-meter-high mountains, played a huge role. From the mountains, the terrain slopes down into flat plains and desert river systems. This diversity in the landscape supported a rich variety of wildlife, which in turn increased the chances for humans to domesticate animals. Archaeological findings show that between 10,000 and 9,000 BCE, at one site in the Fertile Crescent, researchers discovered 157 different types of wild plant seeds collected for domestication. Over the next 1,000 years, this region cultivated the 8 major founding crops, including barley, wheat, peas, chickpeas, and the fiber plant flax. The area also domesticated animals like goats, sheep, pigs, and cattle. Today, the five most important domesticated mammals are all found in the Fertile Crescent, except for the horse. How critical was the success of this region? First, based on archaeological evidence, it's the oldest known agricultural area. Second, the diversity and quality of domesticated species were unmatched. For example, before the 20th century, only 14 large mammal species were domesticated, with 4 of them originating in the Fertile Crescent. Similarly, of the few dozen major crop species we rely on for food today, several of the most valuable ones, like durum wheat, are unique to this area. In contrast, consider New Guinea in the Pacific. This tropical island, the second largest in the world after Greenland, lacked larger seed-bearing grains for domestication like wheat or sorghum. It also didn't have large mammals suitable for domestication. As a result, New Guinea never developed large-scale agriculture. Simply put, the environment just wasn't suited for it. This brings us to the second point. Eurasia's environment didn't just offer suitable species for domestication. It also provided those species in forms that met human needs better than in other regions by chance. Why better, and why by chance? Human needs often conflict with the survival strategies of species. We want seeds that are not toxic and not bitter, but in the wild, these kinds of plants often get eaten by animals before they can propagate. We want beans that don't explode when ripe, but wild beans need to burst open to scatter their seeds far and wide. The same issues occur with animals. Domestication is far more difficult than most people realize. Economically and for safety reasons, we need animals that are easy to care for, those with low food requirements and high biological conversion rates. In other words, animals like pandas, which are picky eaters and consume large amounts, don't work for domestication. Additionally, these animals need to mature quickly and be adaptable to different environments. This means animals like elephants, which take over a decade to reach maturity, are not ideal. Then we need animals with gentle temperaments, not too aggressive or too timid. For example, zebras are too aggressive to be used for pulling carts, and antelopes are too skittish. Either they'll scare themselves to death or crash into fences. Finally, the domesticated animals need to be capable of living in groups, but their social structures can't be too complicated. These strict criteria made it difficult to find many species with agricultural potential. As a result, most geographic and ecological regions lost the opportunity to develop agriculture. In comparison to the success of the Fertile Crescent, areas like Mesoamerica had very few suitable species for domestication. In this region, only turkeys and dogs could be domesticated. These animals provided far less meat than pigs, cows, or sheep. Moreover, the region's main crop, corn, had tough, hard husks that made it difficult to domesticate. Thus, the domestication of plants and animals in Mesoamerica didn't begin until around 3,500 BCE, and settled villages didn't appear until around 1500 BCE. This shows that even when domestication was possible, different geographic environments still determined how valuable and difficult it would be. Now, moving on to the final point about the special geography of Eurasia, its shape. This geography impacted the spread of agricultural developments, and that brings us to the issue of diffusion. Eurasia's axis runs horizontally from east to west, meaning that the regions along the same latitude experience similar day lengths and climates. This allows the exchange of agricultural practices, crops, and domesticated animals across the continent. For example, by around 5400 BCE, agriculture from the Fertile Crescent had already spread into Central Europe through the Hungarian plain. By the time of the Common Era, grains originally cultivated in the Fertile Crescent were being grown all the way from Ireland on the Atlantic coast to Japan on the Pacific coast. In addition, domesticated chickens from China spread westward along this horizontal axis, reaching the Mediterranean and eventually becoming part of European cuisine by Roman times. Similarly, horses, which originated on the Eurasian steppes, spread across the continent and became a key tool in warfare. In contrast, the Americas have a vertical axis, running along the lines of longitude, passing through different climatic zones. This creates significant challenges for species to adapt as they move north or south. For example, the domesticated turkey from Mexico couldn't adapt to the tropical climate as it moved south, and similarly, crops like corn and squash couldn't cross the short 700-mile gap between Mexico and the American Southwest. This restricted the agricultural progress in the Americas. As a result, the agricultural development in the Americas faced severe limitations. Now that we've covered the three major factors that shaped the emergence and spread of agriculture, we can conclude that the special geography of Eurasia gave it an undeniable advantage. With this head start, other continents were left far behind. This geographic advantage is the core of Diamond's argument, and to demonstrate this, he dedicates much of the book to exploring how this agricultural edge led to the rise of other features of Eurasian civilizations. Since agriculture was the fundamental advantage of Eurasian civilizations, how did the later advantages, guns, germs, and steel, emerge from this agricultural foundation? Using the Fertile Crescent as an example, its agricultural advantages quickly pushed human societies onto the fast track of development. First, high and stable food yields allowed for population growth and settlement. As populations increased, their density grew, leading to the emergence of new, complex institutions. These included the development of states, writing systems, widespread immunity to diseases, and the flourishing of social creativity. Let's start with the first of these traits. Why did complex institutions like the state become an inevitable outcome of Eurasian agricultural civilizations? As populations grew denser, people began to live in larger and larger groups. Previously, small tribes of a few dozen people could manage conflicts and coordinate survival with the help of a few familiar faces. But as groups expanded to hundreds of people, dealing with strangers and managing conflicts became more difficult. This led to the need for more formalized structures to coordinate economic interests and resolve conflicts. And with surpluses in food production, it became possible to support people who didn't directly engage in food production, creating the conditions for specialized roles within society. As a result, civilizations like Sumer, Greece, Rome, and China in Eurasia saw their populations grow, and societies began to stratify. Each of these civilizations developed city-states, which had internal laws to maintain hierarchies. Externally, these city-states created armies to conquer surrounding regions and relieve internal population pressures. A prime example of this is the Greek city-states, which continuously sent colonists to the Mediterranean coastline to establish new cities. When these settlers faced resistance, they would demand military protection from their mother city. Additionally, nations used religion or ideologies to create a sense of belonging among people, encouraging cooperation when necessary. In contrast, in places like New Guinea in the Pacific, where there was no significant agriculture, it was very difficult for complex state organizations to emerge. Before European intervention, the population on this island never exceeded 1 million, and even then, the social structure lacked the complexity needed for large-scale cooperation. The island's geography, with its thousands of separate regions, made communication and collaboration between different groups difficult. Some lived in lowland marshes, others in the highlands, while some were scattered across steep mountains and deep valleys. As a result, these communities had little contact with one another, and their civilization remained simple, a stark contrast to the agricultural societies of Eurasia. Now let's talk about the second aspect of civilization, the development of written language. Writing, which initially emerged for accounting, issuing orders, or religious rituals, had a close relationship with agriculture. Early writing systems weren't designed to convey emotions. They were basic, with few characters and simple grammar. Early Egyptian hieroglyphs, Chinese oracle bone script, and Sumerian cuneiform are prime examples of this functional writing. At this stage, writing was a specialized skill and not widespread. Archaeological evidence suggests that in ancient Mycenaean Greece, there were only a few hundred scribes working on clay tablets. As populations grew and people migrated, the need for written communication became more apparent. Migrants needed to use knowledge from their homeland to survive, and those in the motherland needed to conquer more territories. Thus, a new form of communication was required, something that could transcend the limitations of face-to-face interaction, convey large amounts of information quickly, and be preserved over time. Writing met this need, but this time, the script had to be more abstract. For instance, early writing systems could only represent the literal images of people and objects. but later scripts needed to express abstract concepts like belief, agreement, motion, and stillness. In this transition, writing evolved into a more phonetic system, connecting closely with the spoken language. So, how did these early, specialized scripts evolve into the alphabetic systems we use today? This brings us to the third relationship between agriculture and writing. On the Eurasian continent, phonetic alphabets were the result of various civilizations' collective efforts. These experiments with writing spread alongside the diffusion of agriculture across Eurasia. Around 2000 to 1500 BCE, during the early development of civilizations in Mesopotamia and the rise of the Egyptian Middle Kingdom, people in Syria on the western edge of the Fertile Crescent began to simplify Egyptian hieroglyphs into an easier-to-read and remember alphabet. This led to the development of the Phoenician alphabet, which in turn became the ancestor of the Roman alphabet and many other writing systems. To make this clearer, let's consider some simple examples. Early Phoenician letters represented single consonants, much like how the letter B in modern English represents the B sound. Instead of inventing a new symbol for every sound, letters were arranged in a fixed order to make them easier to remember, just like today's alphabet from A to Z. Eventually, Phoenician script began to incorporate vowels, which were later refined by the Romans into the 5 vowels we use today: A, E, I, O, U. Even languages like Arabic and Hebrew developed systems to mark vowels, using additional symbols placed around the consonant letters. You might find these rules familiar, and indeed, this type of writing system has ancient origins tied to the spread of agriculture. In the Americas, however, agriculture spread slowly, and when populations migrated, they often faced climate and environmental challenges. Whether in agriculture or civilization, they had to start from scratch every time they moved. As a result, writing systems in the Americas didn't spread in the same way. The Mayan script, for example, didn't influence the Inca civilization, nor did it reach the northern regions of North America. Having covered the rise of states and the development of writing, let's now explore the unexpected consequence of agriculture, the third characteristic of civilization, Eurasia's advantage in immunity to infectious diseases. Earlier, we discussed how European conquest of the New World was made possible by a deadly weapon, diseases. These diseases, which wiped out far more people than military force alone, mostly originated from the development of agriculture. In Eurasia, the close relationship between humans and domesticated animals, made possible by advanced farming and animal husbandry, significantly increased the chances of diseases jumping from animals to humans. Many animal diseases passed through parasitic insects, direct contact, or consumption, mutated and evolved into diseases that specifically affected humans. Among the most famous of these were the plague from rats, smallpox and tuberculosis from cattle, and flu from poultry. Due to the sedentary nature of agricultural societies, human mobility decreased and population density increased. The accumulation of waste and human products created ideal breeding grounds for bacteria, which spread diseases through human populations. Diseases like smallpox in ancient Rome and the Black Death in the 14th century spread through these dense populations, leading to widespread fatalities. After centuries of repeated outbreaks, however, Eurasian populations gradually developed resistance to these diseases. When these viruses reached the New World, where agricultural development was much less advanced, they encountered populations with no immunity. In these vulnerable communities, the diseases spread rapidly and wiped out large portions of the population. Smallpox, for instance, arrived in the Inca Empire in 1526, killing a significant portion of the population, including the Inca Emperor Atahualpa. Similarly, in 1837, a smallpox virus carried on a boat from St. Louis along the Missouri River decimated an Indian tribe, reducing its population from 2,000 to fewer than 40 in just a few weeks. Now, let's discuss the fourth aspect of civilization, the capacity for technological innovation. According to Diamond, Eurasian agricultural societies created a significant challenge for themselves: how to manage population growth and resolve conflicts over land. To solve this, civilizations in these regions constantly innovated technologically, which drove progress. Without the need for agricultural solutions, inventions like windmills and water-powered mills might never have emerged. Diamond uses ancient China as an example of how technological innovation can flourish in agricultural societies. Until the 15th century, China had the capability to send large fleets across the seas to visit other continents. The treasure fleets led by Admiral Zheng He were more advanced than those of Columbus or Vasco da Gama. However, despite this maritime power, it was Columbus, not Zheng He's successors, who discovered the Americas, and Vasco da Gama, not the Chinese, who rounded the Cape of Good Hope. The reason? After the Ming Dynasty unified East Asia, China had less interest in expanding its external relations, especially after suffering from massive wars that depleted the population. The Ming court believed that overseas expeditions weren't needed, especially when they were focused on self-sufficiency. As a result, China voluntarily withdrew from the age of exploration. A similar situation occurred in Japan. In the mid-16th century, firearms were introduced to Japan during the Sengoku period, and by 1600, improved firearms were commonly used on Japanese battlefields. However, after the Tokugawa shogunate unified Japan and the country lost its need for warfare, interest in firearms waned, and Japan fell behind Europe in firearms technology. Diamond emphasizes that the model of demand-driven innovation applies universally across continents and cultures. Thus, the four key features of civilization based on agriculture, states, writing, immunity to disease, and technological innovation are all deeply intertwined with the agricultural advantages of Eurasia. These advantages enabled the four main civilizations to emerge there, while other regions, like the Americas and the Pacific Islands, remained isolated. In summary, if we swapped the locations of the early societies of the Pacific Islands and Europe, or the indigenous peoples of the Americas with those in the Fertile Crescent, Diamond argues that the unique geography and ecology of Eurasia would have ensured that agriculture would still have emerged there. The four features of civilization driven by agriculture would still have appeared in Eurasia. Perhaps we would have met a brown-skinned Plato, but likely never a white-skinned Einstein. Diamond concludes that human civilization's development was not solely driven by humans themselves, nor was it the result of superior races. Rather, it was the result of deep interactions between humans and their environment. This interaction led humanity to agriculture, which in turn led us to where we are today. And that concludes our exploration of guns, germs, and steel. Thank you for joining me, and stay tuned. I'll continue to guide you through more great books.